Chapter 2. Players' Behavior. In general, there are acknowledgeable and non-acknowledgeable players that come from all backgrounds. Acknowledgeable, also known as unmarried players, don't value following formal traditional ways of marriage or respecting others' privacy. Many of them proceed through a relationship without being held accountable for living an unrighteous lifestyle. If they aren't present 100% of the time, suspicions of unbelief in God diminish over time. The gay community and the overcrowding of prison populations have a huge effect on why more players exist. Although this book discusses homosexuality, it is mainly about opposite-gender relations. Players date multiple women for various reasons and have habitual tendencies when it comes to relationships. Unmarried players tend to have a lot of women thinking they are the main woman, and the newer women perceive them as honest guys. Acknowledgeable players are men who admit to having a girlfriend or wife, one of which is the main woman. They don't intend for a side chick to surface if the main woman isn't supportive of a polyamorous relationship. They expect the side chicks to keep boundaries to avoid physical and verbal fights, and they expect them to accept the other's commitments. If more of them lived righteous lifestyles, they would lead in the original marriage rather than letting their responsibility fall on the main woman's back. And so, they allow her to lead while validating the "I am a man" mentality. Some of them have had a delinquent parent while growing up, and as a result, they don't even value having the main woman. They validate specific elements of the relationship to have an excuse to gather a new woman, even though they fear being exposed to a woman who thinks she's the main woman. Either way, the gathering of women is an irrational concept, whereas they tend to perceive them as a booty call, needing to get done, laid, or smashed. Most players say the other women were a mistake, instead of saying I was desperate for attention or sex. Even if they hustle the women for material things. When these men get caught with a side chick, they often tell the main woman, I won't mess around again. However, they are in a habit of accompanying the other women in relationships. The women don't mind being accompanied part-time. The available time either means, the women compare it to a full relationship or only value part-time love. However, some women ruthlessly and vainly have sex for the pleasure of dominating men. Many acknowledged players tend to visit strip clubs with or without the main woman. Unfortunately, these are men who use the quote, brothers before whores. Being an acknowledgeable player doesn't mean embodying gentle swag by opening doors, paying a tab at dinner, and being honorable. And it doesn't mean an acknowledged player will be a likable man with parents. Acknowledgeable players must be reminded by their woman's friend when they're not acknowledging her as a gentle swag can do. But generally, knowledgeable players don't exercise a gentle swag status enough. While some gentle swag exercise being a player, they acknowledge a woman's needs without validating whether she is needy. Gentle swags acknowledge paying the tab, and when they ask a woman out on a date, they also acknowledge stewardship. The polite way is to pay the tab when a man asks a woman out on a date. Nowadays, when a woman asks a man out, she pays the tab. And relationships are give and take. Tailor-made privilege and wealthy players embody a gentle swag status. The classy men that are gentlemen or old school, embody a classy lifestyle to avoid the player mentality. Being privileged, tailor-made, and wealthy does not mean a man has class. Non-acknowledgeable, also known as married players, tend to lie to enter a fresh relationship. When non-acknowledgeable players are married, most of them deny any existence of other women to the wife. When older players in their 60s and 70s chase, it doesn't stop for them until death occurs. Older players, whether acknowledgeable or non-acknowledgeable, have had time to acknowledge their need to feel valued in a relationship. They have also had time to acknowledge that playing over women won't get the bills paid. And they tend to still embody most of their old lifestyle, because their lives are usually more established as far as personal achievements and goals. Some of these men do tend to let themselves go more than they acknowledge. They don't embrace inner strength and sophistication as much as the young men. They do not like violence, they avoid taking over a woman's life, and so they give her space in the relationship. Once a woman in a fresh relationship wants a commitment, married men will ignore her, unless she otherwise acknowledges his concerns, feelings, ideas, and thoughts, all while remaining undefiled throughout the relationship, and then he may divorce his current wife to marry her. Some tend to visit strip clubs with or without their wife, and they too don't expect a side chick to surface in the marriage unless the wife is accepting of a polygamous marriage. They, too, expect the side chick to accept other commitments. Most players don't wait for a mutual attraction to date a woman, they tend to rely heavily upon their sex drive if they still have one. The remaining player status is a norm for both acknowledgeable and non-acknowledgeable men. They start out playing over women in their teens. Many women have been willing to pay bills and allow the man to bring home a side chick for sex. But if a man asks to bring in another woman, he ought to be the one paying the bills. It's just not fair to a wife and kids. While all this is consistent with unfruitful relationships, according to God's standards, most of them are in denial. These are the people that need to be reached the most concerning God. It is necessary to discuss these topics in this fashion because the soul never dies. Just as the soul never dies, certain types of habitual behavior never die unless you overcome all habitual tendencies wisely, and leave no space for more tendencies. Women with kids. The sole purpose, women with kids who are looking for a man is to find someone who will help them take care of their kids. While men are looking for a woman, some women are unwilling to let a man know up front that they have kids for fear of not being asked out on another date. Or they may want to get to know the man before bringing their kids into the relationship. But often, naughty girls tend to lose respect by cursing or disrespecting men. Some women who classify themselves as a housewife and drink alcohol don't value a man being the first fruit in their and their kids' life. I can't count how many women I have heard saying, "My man doesn't do right by me or my kids." I have been there and said the same things. Is it wrong? Yes. No living God has changed the perspective that man is to become the center of first fruits in their woman's life. When naughty girls curse or disrespect you, just acknowledge that they aren't supposed to be in any of these types of relationships by no means. Avoid becoming abusive towards them or forming an agenda. Women need to be able to keep the basic guidance and structure they have in their kids' lives. Women with kids need to be able to wait on an eternal mate, especially throughout calamity. It is best to take steps back after acknowledging things are headed in the wrong direction from quality care for the kids. Without self-control over habitual habits, there will be none. Initially, women were to acknowledge God through their husbands, but once their husbands didn't believe in God, they were to acknowledge God. Just as we are to respect elders until their actions or words contrast with God's word. Note, in this discussion worthless refers to health, not wealth. A man who dates a young woman is called rhino. There are times when an older man may have dated a young woman's family member while she was a child. During this time, he may have been drinking and using drugs to the point of purposefully using the older family member's finances recklessly. This includes material objects, money for gas in a car, rides to work, or even a place to live. This may have hindered the young woman's growth as a child. Therefore, he repairs his debt obligations by paying or taking care of her once she grows up. But generally, a man marries or dates a much younger woman when he feels worthless, and a woman marries or dates a much older man when she feels worthless. Often, the older man has used multiple women and has multiple young ladies he ends up giving back to. This happens with working and non-working class men. However, only the working class can give back. Consequently, the older men never can remember the people they have hurt or walked all over throughout the years. But the victims were also the people who helped them get where they are today. Convenience is for a marriage of harmony, so don't be supportive of forming a relationship that includes sex for convenience, also known as friends with benefits or FWB. Why do players have access to multiple women? The prison system's overpopulation is only one reason. Also, men are dying at an earlier age than women. Another reason is that digital dating has led to multiple relations openly. Most men are lying about their image and direction, and dishonesty means they're seeking non-commitment romances. It is when men seek out the pleasure that comes from no strings attached sex without striving to create emotional bonds while dating multiple women. With unlimited access to women via the internet, there is no acknowledgement of working issues out in relationships when other relations become unavoidable. This is when tempers flare. The social digital dating trend appears to be turning long-term commitments into a thing of the past. The original goal of a relationship would eventually lead to a commitment, and then marriage to follow tradition. With the man asking for a woman's hand in marriage rather than the woman asking a man's hand for marriage. Traditional marriage has always included some form of polygamy since the beginning of time, whether on the down low or not. The multiple relations consist of partners who participate in sexual desires long or short term. Gang members and want-to-be gang members tend to pull trains on young ladies, and most of them end up prostituting. They refer to multiple men having sex with the same young lady as turning them out. Many gang members and want-to-be gang members tend to become pimps, sometime during their lifetime. And most gang members are often knowledgeable players. Pimps are also acknowledgeable players and well-known gang members who tend to be arrogant and prideful. They desire to be paid and pleased by women who work for them, and often, these are women they date. This is a business opportunity that they lay on the women. They solicit customers for a prostitute so they can get paid. At some point, it becomes exploiting when the women turn on them and then they demand money. Most of the pimp's intent is for the women to utilize the entire body. Though escort services, strip clubs, and topless bars earn profits from the same type of women, most people believe it is immoral and outwardly to profit this way. Those other businesses' demand is taxed, but most pimps haven't been willing to pay taxes on their royalties. Otherwise, their business demands would also be taxed. And sure, this type of business has been around since the late 60s. Prostitution statistics showed that in 2016, there were 40 million prostitutes in the world. It is legal to prostitute in 22 countries. The total revenue then was $186 billion. China came in first with the highest prostitution revenue of $73 billion, then Spain at $26.5 billion, and Japan at $24 billion. The US came in fifth at $14.6 billion. Typically, in the US, a prostitute's average annual income is $290,000, and the average price per trick is $50. Men had purchased were 10%, although this number must have been higher, according to the income women generated. The number of American citizens arrested annually for soliciting sex was 80,000. There were 70% females, 20% males, and 10% of customers arrested for prostitution. The cost to taxpayers in court and jail fees annually was $200 million. The murder rate was 204 per 100,000 for an American prostitute. Ultimately, the number of times a year an average prostitute had unprotected sex was 300. Prostitutes were abused as a child were 75%, and before the age of a female was 14. Many of them wanted to quit, but most of them did not due to financial uncertainty. Most prostitutes said they weren't attractive to customers. Black men seemed to be the trending clients, and the popular service was for oral sex. Popular days of the week women generated were Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. Cops ought to be allowed to fine them for not paying taxes rather than arresting them, with many states going into financial crisis. Pimps and prostitutes are in debt to karma more so than ever before. Pimp mentality. Pimps use every vital technology resource available to promote their workers. The list includes chat rooms, emails, porn videos, texts, tweets, networking websites, etc. Many of them tend to pimp openly in front of businesses, and they use motels for easy access to rooms and showers. Ages for pimps vary. The majority of them often be older males. Pimps dress like street swags while earning street credit by wearing highly fashionable or very low-maintenance clothes. They are not polite, often do pay for a tab at dinner, and don't necessarily get invited to meet women that they date parents. Many pimps to help pay bills or use drugs recklessly, etc. Others pimp due to lack of education, employment, or job experience. Once they are fired from a job or get laid off, either way, it becomes a full-time, and sometimes a part-time job for them. A pimp mentality is a very popular social trend these days for the lack thereof. But unfortunately, pimping does come with a social trend that says it ought to be forced at some point. Most employers force their workers when goofing off to get back to work. Oftentimes pimps coerce the workers to solicit new girls for work. Sometimes the new girls already have pimps, and other times they are fresh prey. This can be young girls ages 12 to 15, it varies what ages they start prostituting. Though pimping has proven to become fatal over time, many men who start pimping end up doing it for an entire lifetime. Tailor-made pimps require workers to profit a certain amount daily, to afford a lavish lifestyle which includes high-end cars, homes, jewelry, VIP restaurants, and nightclub memberships. Pimps beat or threaten their workers. Some women even end up dead. After a pimp has been well known for beating and threatening, their life becomes a target. Therefore, they move around from state to state. Either a woman's family wants revenge against them, or cops have heard they are a well-known pimp. Pimps often have a long list of assaults against women, illegal drug and weapon charges, etc. The pimping mentality needs a change from the old social trend. Nevertheless, once pimps pay tax on their royalties, this will help them change their evil ways. Otherwise, these women will continue being tossed to and fro without addressing the elephant of fear in the world. What will probably happen if pimps did pay taxes? They could help their state, and work on getting out of debt. And if pimps don't pay taxes, they will continue moving from state to state. Optimistically, the states that do pay taxes can work on getting out of debt. When God said to repopulate the earth and have dominion over every creature and living thing, He never meant defiling women just to rule over them like pimps are doing with prostitutes, without acknowledging consequences for actions. Where kids go parentless, grandparents care for their grandkids, or fathers aren't present due to honoring this behavior as a tradition. Until the universe faces this fear that has grown to the size of an elephant, the devil's flesh will continuously dominate the church Al-Hakim Allah established. The ministry is losing a lot of souls with this insidiousness. Ultimately, pimps are defiled embodying a devil's flesh when they ought to form self-value and achieve financial freedom through education. They ought to acknowledge using condoms with street prostitutes and claim their sanity to embody a godly personification. All this to say there is more to life than defiling self-embodying a devil's flesh. A pimp and prostitute relationship. Many of those relationships are built on envy, greed, and lust, and eventually, they become blinded by envy and greed. The irrational concepts help determine the content with one another as an object of lustful desires. While they value one another's strengths from evil acts to find comfort, most times, the evil acts measure whether further acceptance is possible. They never really seek to repair debt or relationships of any kind. It is of no importance to them. The manner of pimps and prostitutes is anxious and hostile with rapid movement which creates tension for others around. Most pimps and prostitutes don't weigh their normal weight due to the constant movement of irrational habitation. They generally want to be on the receiving end of any bargaining, most times with controlling, loud, and pushy tactics. They don't adjust to others' beliefs, they would rather you adjust to theirs. They like terrorizing others who don't agree with their tactics, making endless decisions based on fear. Down low men. Generally, the man is married, dating a woman, or dating a man, but often, the women are unaware of it. Most women won't remain in a relationship once it is revealed. Even though a man who dates other men may remain in a relationship with a woman, it doesn't mean he values the relationship with the woman over the relationship with the man. If the man has felt desires for same gender since childhood, he is still seeking out the pleasure that comes with no strings attached sex, without striving to create emotional bonds. Consequently, the increase in same-gender relations has made more individuals accepting of their African ancestries than prior generations. It has also increased the brutal mentality in police departments. The down-low relations have explored the same gender-sensitive side, where men are unlikely to show emotions in a relationship. It only intensifies the need for more men to be heard in a relationship, whether of the same gender or opposite gender. Young boys ought to be taught to show their emotions more, to the opposite gender to increase the demands of men leading in relationships. This is the life cycle of men not showing their emotions or feelings. Homosexual community. According to the Bible, God's forgiveness is available to a homosexual as an adulterer, idol worshipper, murderer, thief, etc. God promised strength over sin, which means that gays can believe in Allah for salvation. This does refer to the transgender male or female, who lay with the same gender. In the last century, divorce rates have increased due to distorted perceptions of what is to transpire from having a relationship. Several gender and human rights issues have formed that I will discuss. First issue, although God said in Genesis 19 verses 1 to 13 and Leviticus 20 verse 13, "Thou shalt not lie with mankind, as with womankind, it is an abomination." Those references classify the sin of gays as defilement because there is a force that comes with being gay, and it isn't the same as in other relationships. Also, the formation of homosexuality itself has kept a person from believing in God, unbelief in God as a higher power. The gay community tends to be more elaborate and outward while expressing their feelings excessively. You ought to balance your feelings between the extremes of heaven and hell to avoid corruption, as you balance between inward and outward emotions. Excessiveness of any kind is consistent with habitual behavior without balance, order, and structure. So, generally, homosexuals would need to exercise doing things in moderation. Second issue, this force has distorted man's character to watch over things of this world, and a woman doesn't have strength in certain areas as a man does. Third issue, whether two men or two women take care of the kids in a relationship, forcing them to be gay is critical to their long-term development, so either group often abandon them. Fourth issue, women who have been affected by homosexuality haven't been able to create respectable bonds that can last with having to go out to work, etc. The lesser option would have been for birth fathers to be the yoke of the foundation, to allow the mothers to rest. Multiple relations have hindered both foundation processes from becoming eternal. Women have a right to pursue their kids' biological fathers for certain strengths to look out for their kids. Fifth issue, the youth are often forced into homosexual relations, of whom have non-supportive parents. Whether youth are born-again Christians or not, they have a right to choose a partner, and that right ought not to be distorted. Furthermore, a gay that does have kids has a right to be able to eternally bond with their kids while avoiding fatality. This makes gays be perceived as selfish for their force in a relationship when men and women do have kids. Relationships have become a hot mess, and eliminating the forcefulness in relationships is a must to form supportive conversations. Having said that, when standing steady in the yoke with Allah, you don't go purposefully defiling others' purest intent. Just letting loving, kind, and peaceful feelings flow naturally is the new social norm for this perspective. Sixth issue, men and women both get sex change surgery. However, for a person to do things in moderation, they must remain in their God-made structure because this is the model design created for His glory and works. So, if you change the structure, this shows that you aren't happy with what God created. How can you be resurrected from a body that has been manipulated? Furthermore, how many changes does it take to be truly happy with oneself? This means that one is in their glory, not God's glory, and are being less authentic and genuine. It also shows signs of evasiveness to do what is immoral to achieve. Life is not complicated until you make it difficult for yourself. Seventh issue, both women and men are tired of having their partner be on the down low and are not held accountable according to the concerns in this book. Whether it is the law or not, while on the down low, typically, homosexuals can do everything that others can do. But at the end of the day, it is your choice. As partakers of the higher righteousness, homosexuals/gays ought to consider the conditions and principles of the resurrection, just as any other person to overcome trial tests. To acknowledge responsibility as Allah's followers, thus His servants. To be a witness of Allah is an invitation, not a demand as non-believers perceive. It does involve determination, participation, and willpower. Does this mean the path you have chosen needs to become normal again? It is up to God and the individual what is to transpire. Acknowledge that God has power over heaven and earth, and then pray to ask, what will He have you to do? Homosexuality can involve aggressiveness, alcohol, arrogance, bullying, converting, controlling, death rituals, deceit, distribution of illegal drugs, drunkenness, gang-banging, down low, smoking illegal drugs, lies, manipulation, multiple sex partners, naughty behavior, excessive thoughts, nudity, physical fights, random sexual partners, threesomes, sexual characters, and verbal cursing. Reproving bias surrounding homosexuality. When God destroyed the earth and its natural resources, men were repopulating with multiple women, along with relations of the same gender. Initially, there were gays. People's health was defiled by cancer and diseases, and there was no structure in the way they did things. Nevertheless, the religious haven't been utilizing the homosexual bonds of communication effectively. Many have said, in the beginning, God created Adam and Eve, but not Adam and man to create a child. Most religions tend to believe God will create a web of destruction in their lives if they do bond with gays. But there are a few things to take into consideration when being biased against human rights. Homosexuality isn't an eternal trial test that can hinder the walk with Allah. They have a right to pursue God and all His expectations. Their sins won't be covered. All sins must be forgiven just as reproved. No one has the right to stand in God's process in people's lives, and everyone inherits the ability to balance their emotions. When congregational members, pastors, or teachers say gays shouldn't come to church without changing their wicked ways, just acknowledge this already applies to all men and women. Furthermore, you don't have to hold grudges against the gay sin itself and then turn around acknowledging God forgives all sin. According to Hezekiah, it is only necessary for one person to be the highest authority. Everyone can't be the highest authority. This is to avoid having people's ways of life becoming distorted with God's purest intent. Can the religious come to a saving grace point with God and homosexuals? Yes. All things are possible with God's guidance. Can the religious forgive the homosexual community? Not enough people appear to be walking the walk, and too many appear to be talking the talk. When more individuals revel in vainglory as a high authority, of course, it is going to rub the religious the wrong way. The Bible teaches us to forgive, and when ordinary people ask for forgiveness, their sins are forgiven. However, whether biblical knowledge is on religious minds, traditions remain in their comfort zone. If you haven't been a part of the righteous tradition, they tend not to be as forgiving, and this is whether you are a part of the homosexual community or not. And so, both the homosexual community and the religious ought to avoid putting themselves above God and His expectations. As more homosexuals reprove their sins, it will be possible for the religious to forgive them. What can homosexuals do to help create peace? Although drifting away from God can be fatal, most homosexuals have had some acknowledgement of God in their lives. Just continually ask forgiveness, and acknowledging vainness is cowardice to not stand firm in the yoke with Allah. Don't value getting a point across, and you will win every time, whether you acknowledge the win or not. Ordinarily, you will encounter people wanting to get a self-righteous point across but avoid confrontation of any kind by turning the other cheek. Most importantly, keep a calm peace about yourself when confronting false or misleading quotations. To distinguish knowledge of the world from uncertainty, get true understanding before you judge others' beliefs and tactics. Why aren't most players honoring stewardship? When men aren't knowledgeable of stewardship, they tend to be needy. Once a man is known as needy, he is acknowledged as being a hustler. Hustlers tend to use women for things that they can achieve themselves. Things a man needs to embody gentle swag statuses, such as finance, housing, or transportation. But normally a hustler puts his needs before a woman or her kids, and this can become a problem. While they steal, kill, and destroy a child's future, often, this is done with no remorse. Some hustlers after that can become abusive while wallowing in the funk of depression. This is often after she acknowledges that he has an agenda to not be held accountable for his actions. When a hustler is found out, they tends to move on to the next woman that finds him appealing, honest, and nice. A man acknowledges stewardship when he knows what it means to be a gentle swag who is accountable for his actions. What does stewardship mean in a relationship? It means you are personally responsible for taking care of your or another person's property or financial affairs. The managing of someone else's property, careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. As a Christian, it is the faithful use of what God has given you as gifts from money, talents, and thoughts. The use of talents is special. It is the natural ability to achieve success from a professional action using the body or mind to improve on various levels. God gives talents according to the abilities, but He rather you bring back what you reap at the altar equally given. He needs you to continually reprove your love, honesty, and priorities through giving. Tithing is conclusive to giving money faithfully and sacrificially. Psalms 37 verse 4, and generally, in most churches individually 10% tithes are needed for the church to run as an organization for spiritual growth. Why a player with swagger wouldn't exercise politeness? Since these men may be dating other men, players tend to fear being checked by their woman with biblical knowledge. They tend to put on a show to seek attention from people whose souls are weak. The player mentality itself is associated with the Jezebel spirit because the Jezebel spirit will seek to attack, infiltrate, and undermine everything, all while hating and mocking people of leadership, etc. The Jezebel spirit doesn't acknowledge its masculine traits. You got to know what you stand for during end times, and the Jezebel spirit doesn't even care about ethical values. Embracing swagger often exercises cold-heartedness, whether these are the man's dating men or not. Embodying swag does have its downfalls, however, it doesn't have to be based upon arrogance. God doesn't like haughtiness. Furthermore, kids and teens need to be able to acknowledge swag as something positive, not as having a haughty spirit. Impoliteness reverses when you embrace unlimited politeness. Politeness, it isn't just about paying a tab, showing acknowledgement, that you genuinely care about one another. Exercise politeness. Make them feel unique, show them respect, and exercise patience. Example number 1, what if your spouse said, "I feel severe pain in my upper back area, I need to go to a hospital right away." You don't say, "Go ahead, I'll catch up with you." No, just drop what you are doing and go with them. Example number 2, what if your spouse said, "My mother may die. I have to go to the hospital right away." You don't say, "I'm not going, I have other things to do, see you later." No, you go with them to see if the mother will get better first. Politeness goes a long way. Religious community. Most religious men appear outwardly these days when they don't wear underwear. Whether they cheat with a babysitter, choir member, nursery schoolteacher, piano player, receptionist, secretary, Sunday school teacher, or treasurer, what is done in secret is also unfaithful. Is this consistent with vainness? It isn't what an eye doesn't see, it is what an eye can't see, though some may mess around inside the church. Religions tend to fear being exposed on a greater scale than just the norm for dishonesty. While religious men are preconceived as having not cheated on their wives, religious men tend to do everything in plain sight for the glory of God, but everything that is done in secret often comes to light. God acknowledges how to deal with individuals who lie purposefully. In this contemporary world, most men aren't favorable to admitting they have failed when it comes to cheating. This shows a lack of dishonesty toward God, the wife, and the kids. Once a religious husband has been found out for cheating, they don't necessarily do what any man would do, such as continuing to see the other woman even if it means leaving his wife. They often work things out with the wife. Breakups in religious marriages don't happen as often as in non-religious marriages. Infidelity for religious and non-religious cheating spouses varies. The cheating doesn't always happen at a church. Often, it happens outside the church. This is one reason why they're able to keep the congregational community a close-knit society of individuals that generally involves current church members. I have noticed that within a few religious families, a child may resemble another church member due to a prior marriage or a husband cheating outside the marriage. Since religious men are preconceived as having not cheated on their wives, she may have acknowledged he had cheated but decided to remain in the marriage for their kids' sake. Is it wrong? No, it isn't. This is one common solution to the cheating affairs of the heart. None are perfect, not one. All the work they do is for the glory of God, and ordinarily, religious men provide quality care for their spouses and kids. Vain behavior. Multiple relations have become vainer than ever before, and it doesn't matter where in America you choose to live. The term vain means producing no significance or value, that is done outwardly. Vanity can mean revealing nudity and outwardly can mean appearing unrighteous but charming. However, both terms are direct approaches to prideful behavior and can be passed down from generation through DNA. Having said that, religious and non-religious appear to show a vain approach nowadays more so than in prior years. The vain behavior of players exercises rebellion against the Father in heaven, and most women don't respect them as a man but as a man on the down low. Even religious writers commonly reveal outward opinions and statements in their books. Religious and non-religious people tend to state their opinions with a lack of acknowledgement that they were a part of the curse when Eve ate the forbidden fruit and that they are a part of the one human race. When you don't acknowledge what vibes you are setting off, you tend to set off excessive behaviors without a righteous approach. During the times you ought to be embodying an angelic or godly character, you tend to be more revealing. Charming people tend to appear outgoing, and no one rather appears less outgoing for fear of being labeled as born. Even though being cleansed by the Holy Spirit can mean following routines that can be classified as traditions. So, what isn't cleansed by the Holy Spirit of God is dishonorable and is common. And what is cleansed by the Holy Spirit of God is honorable and uncommon. Overcoming vainness. God guides us through Scripture with the Holy Spirit for spiritual growth. He uses outward circumstances to get you to come or look back to Him for guidance. And He uses the significant desire to form your righteous direction for His will. You don't have to hold in those suppressed emotions for an entire lifetime, and you don't have to lose faith in God. Even though vainness got passed down from your father and mother, make it your duty to forgive them for the things that you grew up seeing them doing in vain. Yes, their sins were unfair, and it is your right to acknowledge the sin as wrong. So, find it in your heart to forgive them. Ordinarily, new generations must try harder to overcome trial tests, and most times, you can't give up. It doesn't have to be the extent of your entire story. Let go of the bitter emotions and release the hurt you have in the heart. It is up to us to change the cycles of abuse and vanity, corny arrogance and ignorance behavior. What we have learned thus far, men who are arrogant act superior over others, disrespect others also want to be admired and respected. Ignorant men don't listen, don't absorb the information presented to them, don't want to learn anything new, also are selfish, and avoid using their brains for practical things. Confidence and arrogance. There is a thin line that separates a man you ought to date from a man you ought not to. When a man has confidence, he believes and feels that he can rely on someone or something with firm trust. When a man exudes arrogance, he reveals and has an exaggerated sense of one's abilities and importance. Both women and men tend to hate arrogant traits in men, and everyone likes confidence. Modesty shows a quality or state of moderate estimation in one's abilities. When a man can do things in moderation, he avoids excessiveness and going to extremes, especially in one's behavior or political opinions. This reveals the ability to take action or make something less extreme, intense, or violent. Practical education, discipline, guidance, and daily intake of high nutritional and protein foods help form self-concepts. As an adult, some concepts are already implanted into the subconscious data stores, but without the practical formation of self-concepts, a person cannot make wise choices. The function of your subconscious mind is to store and retrieve data. Its job is to ensure that you respond exactly the way you are programmed. Your subconscious mind makes everything you say and do fit a pattern consistent with your self-concept. In general, self-concept is thought of as our perceptions of our abilities, behavior, and unique characteristics. A mental picture of who you are as a person. For example, beliefs such as, "I am an arrogant person," or "I am a confident person," are part of an overall self-concept. Self-concept tends to be malleable as a youth because they are still going through the process of self-discovery and identity formation. As people age, self-perceptions become detailed and organized as people form better ideas of who they are, what is important to them, and what is expected of them. Conscious men are not arrogant by many standards, these men are pseudo-spiritual. Signs of a spiritual man: they recognize themselves in all beings, they live life from a place of complete humility and sincerity, they love without expecting to be loved back, they are comfortable with not knowing, they trust life's wisdom, they have no interest in being who people think they should be, their wisdom is their own, they forgive easily, they give without expecting anything in return, their heart is at peace even amid adversity, they embrace all that comes their way, they purify their soul of attachments, they no longer look outside themselves for the fulfillment, they see themselves as a spiritual being having a human experience, and they delight themselves in quietness and solitude. The unconscious mind comprises mental processes that are inaccessible to consciousness but influence behavior, feelings, or judgments. Sigmund Freud said the unconscious mind is the primary source of human behavior. The unconscious influences our behavior and experiences, even though we are unaware of these underlying influences. The unconscious can include repressed desires, feelings, habits, hidden memories, reactions, and thoughts. Other things to watch for are how he treats others, admits mistakes, maintains eye contact, his general behavior, his willingness to learn, do rather than say, what is said and how it's said, and his social relationships. Seeking excessive or negative attention makes a man appear arrogant. A lack of awareness of one's actions and practical education makes one appear ignorant. Some people embody arrogance to brag about things they have achieved, and others embody arrogance to cover up missing links of something they lack. Either action shows signs of negative behavior. Arrogance and ignorance can over time lead to corniness, and to appear corny is to lack sentimental thoughts while lost in an old-fashioned style. The old-fashioned style reveals an aggressive but dominant personification with false and misleading facts, and most times distortion plays a huge factor. Ordinary people form these actions and behaviors in everything they do and say, all while believing they embody diversity. But most people don't care about diversity enough to change their evil ways, so avoid believing in diversity without being true to self first. Once a person hasn't developed the ability to make wise choices, they lack true understanding. After that, bitterness and envy form into the heart, which tends to transpire through immoral acts. Once you lack respect for yourself and others, the probability of crime increases. As an adult you can lead youth in the right direction, too many adults are leading them astray. When teens are exposed to guns and violence, they get overwhelmed and often get locked up before reality hits them. They don't get murder charges carries a death sentence, and an accessory charge of murder carries a life sentence for each person that ends up dead. Most murders happen while other serious crimes are taking place, such as assault and battery, burglary, robbery, selling illegal drugs, or sexual assaults. Also, extortion is a serious crime whether it is done against a customer as a pimp or prostitute. Teens need to comprehend the time they face will be spent away from family and friends. For some this will be indefinite. For the teens who can't comprehend these charges, it means being present during or taking part in a serious crime. Some individuals commit these types of crimes, and spend a lifetime going through appeal courts to get turned down for parole, every time. And basically, All this could lead to a lifetime on the run looking for an escape. Serious crimes lead to an uncontrollable mind. The person committing the crimes doesn't know who to fear most, cops or the victim's family wanting to seek revenge. Players tend to embody arrogance and ignorance too, with police authorities. Police officers are here to serve by detecting and preventing crime for the maintenance of public order. In criminology, public order crime is defined by Siegel, 2004, as crime which involves acts that interfere with operations of society and the ability of people to function efficiently. This behavior is labeled criminal because it is contrary to customs, shared norms, and social values. Many people who rebel against authority tend to think that they're fighting for injustice and forming different perspectives of social norms. And it only makes matters worse when you don't acknowledge the consequence and self-awareness of actions. These are individual family members who are killed like savages. Anyone can be fearful if you don't confess the true nature of the crime you have taken part in or witnessed, because obviously, you can come up dead. This also means that you have given up on becoming a fighter for what is obedient and right. The cowardly nature after taking part in or witnessing crimes needs a change to the old social views. Teens must be able to make better choices. With every choice there is a consequence. Non-supportive parents. There are 4 quotes that uncertain people tend to use once things go wrong. It is a dog-eat-dog world. However, as a parent, you don't necessarily need to use the quote, "If you don't work you won't eat," with your kids. Especially, if you haven't been able to provide them with a daily intake of high nutritional and protein foods. Furthermore, this will only instill hatred into their hearts for the person teaching it. The term was used by slave owners when their workers were goofing off, and they wanted them to get back to work. While the term is a quote taken from the Bible, back in the day, people only had access to naturally made foods, which didn't have unhealthy substances in the food blends. The quote's usage often happens when a parent is trying to discipline for various things that don't have anything to do with food, and you cannot discipline kids with food this way. Nowadays, non-supportive parents, who haven't developed the ability to make wise choices, tend to use the quote more so than other parents. Basically, from experience, using the quote doesn't necessarily form dignity, grace, honesty, or respect for people of authority. Especially, if there is misguidance present in the home structure, such as parents using their government assistance or work finances, buying alcohol and illegal drugs excessively, and remaining in poverty. Receiving help from the government is a basic opportunity that can help anyone get ahead in life. Those finances are to be spent on high nutritional and protein foods, along with better housing and transportation. Non-supportive parents who use the quote, "If you don't work you won't eat," also tend to use the quote, "The white man is keeping me down," or "The black man is keeping me down." 2 non-supportive parents tend to use the quote, "You are not the parent," or "You are not a good parent," to their kids with kids of their own. When all these social views have needed new perspectives for quite some time now. As a result, most parents who did these same things rather not take ownership of the negative things they did, which has helped ruin their kids' lives. However, they will quote, "I've raised my kids right," in a heartbeat. It isn't necessary to go out of the way to ruin your child's testimony, embodying a double-minded and evasive lifestyle. When embodying excessive arrogance or ignorant behavior, it doesn't say you value the sacrifices Al-Hakim Allah made. You ought to want to do and explain things like a supportive parent, because practical formation and responsible conversation heal kids. Ordinary people haven't been willing to change these social trends, but all perspectives weren't put together where they can be ironed out until now. Crime statistics showed in the U.S. during 2014 there were 1,165,383 violent crimes reported, including aggravated assaults, murder, non-negligent homicides, rapes, and robberies. These crimes were reported by law enforcement. During this time, 73% arrested for these crimes were males, and 27% of arrests were females. Aggravated assaults were 63.6% of violent crimes, robberies 28%, rapes 7.2%, and murders 1.2%. Property crimes totaled 8,277,829. This included burglaries, larceny, and motor vehicle thefts. Larceny thefts were 70.8%, burglaries 20.9%, and motor vehicles 8.3%. The financial losses victims suffered totaled $14.3 billion. Arrests during this time totaled 11,205,833. though 498,666 were for violent and 1,553,980 property crimes. The highest number, 1,561,231 arrest, was for drug abuse, larceny, theft 1,238,190, and then 1,117,852 driving under the influence. Violent crimes during 2014 decreased by 0.2%, while property crimes decreased by 4.3% from 2013. Mankind showing remorse. Cultural refinements have remained one of the hottest topics for centuries now. In the past, having and showing remorse meant you feared a wrongful conviction. Today, having or showing remorse means the person convicted of a crime, guilt, or innocence can be proven through DNA association. While God would want mankind to know He hasn't forsaken them, DNA can confirm their innocence. In 1989, the first DNA exoneration took place, and statistics showed 20 of 341 people exonerated served time on death row, with 4,658 being the number of years served total. Out of the 341 people exonerated, 36 had pleaded guilty to crimes they never committed. Nevertheless, many African American players, since DNA exoneration has been established, are more susceptible to committing a crime. And nowadays, even with DNA exoneration, African American males dominate crime statistics. It is revealed through statistics of belief in God, business and home ownership, job employment, marriages, other relationships, etc. Over time, too many people have become willing to report an African American male for crimes. I remember as a kid, seeing the daily news of many African American men being put in jail or prison to remain until death occurred. No one was allowed to speak out about it for fear of another wrongful conviction. While society held on to greed and some traditions that were unbearable to live by, these men were holding on to a set of prison bars for comfort. All this confirms that more men are wallowing in the denial personification. It is time for African American men to change their perceptions of the past by admitting faults and showing remorse for wrongful actions. Any man today needs to be able to distinguish between the difference between real danger and empty threats. So, avoid letting your negative emotions of not having proper essentials rule the assignment Al-Hakim Allah requested before His final death decree, of which is to help others become witnesses of His experiences. It is highly recommended that you examine your instinct with God's intent, to change human actions and behavior on any given basis. If you don't believe in God's power, you won't believe in humanity. A lifetime of guidance and obedience leads to blessings, hope, and prosperity. And a lifetime of disobedience and misguidance leads to destruction, violence, and incarceration. Deuteronomy 30 verses 15 to 18, and basically, you walk after defiled flesh, which is a symbol of the devil's flesh. It is your choice, so don't blame God or others for the choices you have made when it comes to living to die. Be about His life, and get over yourself. It isn't all about committing crimes. Sympathetically, try sharing the gospel. Homeless statistics showed in the U.S. there were 564,708 people homeless in 2015. This included veterans. There were 436,921 adults and 127,787 children homeless. 69% were living in shelters and 31% were on the streets. In 2014 there was 578,424 homeless, a decrease of 13,344 from 2013. From 2007 to 2015 the homeless population decreased, but the death total increased due to the increase in gun owners. Homelessness impacted a need for expansion of help program services, but overall, the expansions didn't get utilized enough to impact homelessness, though expansions have decreased due to the state's financial crisis. Involuntary forms of homelessness are the results of drug addictions, crime rates, forms of extortion, mental illness, and sex addictions. Advocating homelessness 30 years. Although mankind evolved from the wilderness, we have revolutionized from valuing a wilderness lifestyle. America, where there are tons of opportunities to profit from legal businesses and jobs, due to a lack of righteous knowledge of traditions, mankind continues to habitat in the wilderness. When you are used to making short-term decisions, you don't take into consideration the world advocates for the here and now, of popularity behavior. And so, you tend to think with an old-fashioned mentality, that often seems out of touch with reality. Nevertheless, the various reasons that people become homeless range from alcohol or drug usage, job loss, and no motivation or willpower to achieve. To a family member taking over government assistance income for their benefit and taking over a family member's government assistance to benefit, is a form of extortion. Homeless shelters, mental facilities, and prisons are involuntary forms of homelessness. These places were established to help build long-term independence for those in need. Since the world has revolutionized, this should have manifested into less homelessness. However, in the world today there are more homeless individuals than in years prior. The Bible says there will be trial tests, which means they're not supposed to last a lifetime. Once in a habit of making the wrong choices, you become incapable of being independent or living on your own. Furthermore, you don't set up family members who are capable of living on their own for a lifetime of failure. Whether family traditions are the use of alcohol and illegal drugs, assault and battery, burglary, extortion, pimping, prostitution, robbery, selling illegal drugs, sexual assaults, theft, or vandalism of property. Teaching teens these types of behaviors isn't an honorable tradition according to the Bible. It will only form homelessness for an entire lifetime. Though things needed to embody respect for the Father in heaven are a Bible, purest intent, and natural foods also, you need long-term finances and permanent housing. When you become impatient with family, friends, programs, services, or people of authority, you ought to take a step back to acknowledge the misunderstandings. The result is a devaluation of one's willingness to live and can lead to not exercising obedience to the biblical laws. The laws people follow today evolved from Bible laws. Also, if you are not in a habit of respecting your parents, of course, you are going to have problems following any laws or respecting any type of authority. Old memories of dealing with these perspectives haven't changed anything. You should want to change your thoughts toward these perspectives, to change your beliefs. All this to say, there is more to life than sleeping on the streets. Revenge of wrongful sufferings. When someone has wronged you, ordinarily you suffer affliction or trial tests. But seeking revenge uses energy, emotions, and time, and the emotions alone can take up a lot of time. Through emotions, anger, bitterness, distortion, destruction, hatred, murder, slander, strife, torture or violence can be formed. Those are the major emotions revenge uses, and any of them can lead to greed. There are other ways of dealing with those emotions. Other great ways of dealing are acknowledging your daily emotions as trial tests, forgiving the enemy 70 times 70, or even reconciling with the enemy. Once you acknowledge the daily emotions as a trial test, simply stay on track with biblical knowledge and don't give up. Giving up during trial tests and sufferings tends to make them last an eternity. Although the forgiveness emotion doesn't get expressed often, it too is a matter of convenience. When you forgive, it doesn't mean forgetting the wrong. You let go of the wrong emotions. If you practice reconciliation while forgiving someone before revenge takes place, it is best to come to a saving grace point with that person to prevent becoming a prisoner of emotions. The saving grace point involves both coming together to set aside their differences along with prayer. Furthermore, when you have wronged someone, show remorse by saying, "I'm sorry." Appreciation of gratitude. Often not having the essentials such as comfortable housing, further education, health supplies, supportive parents, and proper guidance, thereafter the influence can be meaningless negativity. While not having those essentials has affected millions of people every day, the way you are trained to show your actions and behavior can become a result of a downfall. And embodying anything excessively can become the result of that. Most people struggle with fear, self-doubt, traditional standards, or uncertainties hidden behind the reality of overcoming. This means anyone can be classified as cray at some point in life. Normally God will supply all your needs, but He won't while lost in sin. Generally, you would need to be obedient to get far in life according to the Bible. The Bible refers to gifts, honors, and rewards, and to achieve rewards you would need to overcome to reach the victories. You ought to show gratitude for the things of this world unless you want them taken away. God said, "Our treasures are in heaven," therefore, you don't become a burden trying to obtain them. This includes the use of alcohol and illegal drugs, assault and battery, burglary, extortion, pimping, prostitution, robbery, selling illegal drugs or sexual assaults, theft, and vandalism of property. Also, the quality of being thankful, when others extend their kind hearts, ought to be appreciated. Thanks, or returning kindness, goes a long way. Social intercircles to become socially interactive. Some people move around a lot, and others get themselves locked up to avoid social interactions. They tend to feel intimidated, and so they rather go through the extremities of trial tests. God would rather you acquire further education to become profitable, rather than advocating destruction and violence, seeking homelessness or incarceration as an outlet to hide in fear. The prison system isn't working for most people, and incarceration should be the last thing on anyone's mind. And the social outlets of clubs, night bars, or strip joints won't enable you to claim the righteous victory. Inner circles enable interaction with intelligent people in such places as colleges, church gatherings, jobs, libraries, local gyms, schools, or voluntary work, etc. They are a place for refuge and reinvention, and basically, you are out of danger to the wicked people of the world. While communicating with others for long-term guidance, leadership, and structure overlooking the fear of criticism. Either of these will help to embody a righteous personification with concern and value for people in a time of need, and it will help to become spiritually connected. You will ultimately become satisfied with yourself and the direction you are headed, and you will value obtaining a degree in education. Changes in partnership perspectives. The Bible says men are to look out for things in this world, and in relationships, men have led for millions of years. While men have been watching out for the things of this world, they haven't been able to express their inward emotions. Relationships that don't allow the man to lead, aren't acknowledged or valued as traditional. And relationships that aren't founded on God's principles, there are no boundaries, and you find them out during the breaking of the rules. But relationships that don't form boundaries aren't going to last. Relationships founded on God's principles are expected to have traditional values, which shows loyalty. In these eternal relationships, each partner must be able to express concerns and emotions equally inwardly and outwardly, to balance between the extremes of heaven and hell. In any relationship, you must be clear and direct about what your boundaries are, and then don't let boundary violations slide. If you have a partner who doesn't want to form boundaries, they probably wouldn't want to respect them either, and that can be a problem. Boundaries are a line that marks the limits of an area, which helps form balance, order, and structure. Often boundaries are surrounded by dedication, devotion, and sacrifices to avoid compromises. The boundaries could include emotions, information, money, possessions, space, and time. In emotions, some people may be oversensitive or even irrational. Personal information helps form your identity, personal assets are useful and often of value, and personal space can be threatened or uncomfortable. Both external and personal time are the same. Personal time is the time that one experiences personally, and external time is the time used to perform work. In ordinary cases, you have the right to keep these areas of your life private and choose whom it is private to. Any of which can hinder growth, so just be clear and direct. It is okay to set different boundaries with different people. It's also okay if someone doesn't understand why you set such boundaries. To acknowledge the consequences if boundaries are crossed, they just must know what the boundaries are. Also, to have an eternal relationship, each partner must communicate feelings, ideas, and thoughts of other significant concerns to form dignity. At the beginning to visualize whether a long-term commitment is possible, and at midpoint to visualize basic commitments were kept to set a marriage date. What can you do for me? Before 2000 the world advocated for a stay-at-home mom. Nowadays most men want their woman to help pay the way. Both women and men are seeking someone faithful, honorable of stewardship, and polite enough to take home to parents, and often this does include someone with a job. This has led to competition for high pay, with women too wanting their pay. They have become choosier when it comes to men. Finding love for most has been more about selfless pride, and less about joining together as one. With men valuing another breadwinner, perceptions of who is to express their emotions are still up in the air. In this stereotype perspective, the person who leads is also the breadwinner and they don't get to express inward emotions. If the woman is a breadwinner, her emotions will go unnoticed by default. Since women are inwardly, most of them haven't been willing to share the expression of inward emotions, which makes them appear self-centered and stubborn. And since men are outwardly, most of them haven't been willing to share the expressing of outward emotions, which makes them appear arrogant and ignorant. Relationships suffer when men are unable to express their emotions, and when women are unable to express their daily concerns. If both work outside the home, some issues must be addressed. Other significant concerns can include buying school clothes and school supplies, or daycare for the kids after school. Also, who will prepare breakfast, who will prepare lunch for the kids, who will pick the kids up from school, who will prepare dinner, who will help the kids with their homework, and who will prepare the kids for bed. Some common concerns are barriers to communication, emotional distance, financial difficulties, routine conflict, sexual intimacy issues, and lack of trust. Relationships require work and are bound to face large and small challenges. Everyday stressors can strain an intimate relationship, and major sources of stress may threaten the stability of the relationship. If each partner is willing to develop a solution to address the issue, most relationship problems are manageable, but when challenges are left unaddressed, tension mounts, poor habits develop, and the health and longevity of the relationship are in jeopardy. Some men may even fear being judged for not leading the home properly as a man should do. Even in same-sex relationships, these concerns lead to confusion. There is no respect in the world for a stay-at-home dad or mom. The woman's perspective of expressing inward emotions ought to be shared to be counted as a tradition. Women ought to take a step back, to allow men to express emotions. Since men are willing to allow women to lead going out to work, to continue honoring this perspective, men ought to become less stressed by getting more sleep. With proper sleep, men's and women's selfless pride wouldn't happen, and either would be able to make clear sense with relaxed communication, and things would be avoidable. Polygamy and its extended forms. Polygamy is also known as polygyny, polyandry, or plural marriage. Polygamy means taking part in a marriage with several spouses. Traditionally for a man, there is a choice between several females and/or young females. Systematically, the young females are given away as brides in a pyramid, while the young males are cast out to enable older wealthy men to have multiple wives. The older wealthy men donate money to help build a temple, and then as a gift, they get the younger wives. The young women are used as living currency to be exchanged in the pyramid. Polygamy has existed in Africa since the beginning of time. Nigeria is home to over 40 million polygamists. A large population of fathers can't even count the number of children that they have. Polygamy is killing the vibe of native Nigeria, most of Africa, Middle Eastern countries, and the Third World. In North America, polygamy wasn't a culturally legally, or normative recognized institution, before the continent's colonization by Europeans. The Church of Latter-day Saints was formally organized in a small log cabin, in upstate New York in 1830. Polygamy became a significant political and social issue in the United States in 1852, when the Church of Latter-day Saints, also known as the LDS Church, made it known of their practice, which is called plural marriage, and that it was part of its doctrine. Nowadays LDS churches include Latter-day Saints and Mormons. The total of members for Latter-day Saints is 16,118,169, and Mormons, which includes US 6,592,195, Brazil 1,354,127, Mexico 1,417,011, and the Philippines 745,959. This totals 26,227,461, and with Nigeria over 66 million members exist around the world. Polygamy culture supports child sexual abuse, and enables the rapid spread of heart disease, HIV, mental illness, rape, and even STDs. Polygamy has often formed the oppression of women. They are fueled with bitterness, and polygamy's insidiousness lowers their self-confidence. Having said that, traditional marriage has often included a man with several women/side chicks rotating throughout his bedroom. Ordinary people believe plural marriage is a sexy nightly threesome that relies solely on sexual stereotypes and enables the fast breeding of children. While polyamorous is an act of taking part in multiple serious romantic or sexual relationships, this seems to be what players and playgirls are advocating nowadays. Any form of polygamy can have its downfalls, supporting child sexual abuse. Polyamorous male or female persons with kids are destitute and illiterate with various needs for relying on government assistance. The result is fewer children knowing their fathers, all while under submission to oppression and violence. Any structure built on plural relations nowadays will result in it not working effectively for anyone to benefit responsibly. Since 2004, polygamy relationships have increased to over 2 billion men and women. Over 3 billion people believe in polygamy, and over 2 billion women and children around the world live under the oppression of polygamy. Why obsessing over nudity is wrong? People who obsess have either obsessive thoughts and urges or compulsive, repetitive behaviors. Obsession is a compulsive disorder. Dangers of sex addiction. Sex addiction is a state characterized by compulsive engagement or participation in sexual activities such as sexual intercourse. According to specialists, sexual addiction is one of several sex-related disorders within the concept of hypersexual disorder. Sexual dependence refers to people who are unable to control their sexual behaviors, thoughts, or urges. Pathological sexual behavior includes hypersexuality, erotomania, and paraphilia. The concept of sexual addiction is controversial among psychiatrists, psychologists, sexologists, and other specialists whether compulsive sexual behavior constitutes an addiction. The research established on animals suggests that sexual behavior arises from the same transcriptional and epigenetic mechanisms that mediate drug addiction in laboratory animals. Sexual addiction has a classification, under ICD-11 as compulsive sexual behavior, to cover a persistent pattern of failure to control intense, repetitive sexual impulse or urges resulting in repetitive sexual behavior. Is sexual addiction a mental disorder? It isn't acknowledged as a legitimate mental health disorder in the clinical literature, but sexual addiction is identified in the public consciousness as a legitimate neuropsychological disorder. When you have a sex addiction, you have gotten out of line with yourself, and you possibly have been sexually molested or forced to prostitute at an early age. Either way, you now have delusional thoughts and weak willpower to do what is morally right. But delusional thoughts and weak willpower surrounding addictions are very common in our society, and so you are not alone. The delusional state of well-being often leads to other addictions including alcohol, drugs, extortion, gluttony, lust, spending, even thievery. Those enslavements are habitual habits, non-resistant impulses, unmodified actions, and behavior. Uncontrolled impulses make you susceptible and vulnerable to sex addiction. Most people who were taken advantage of at an early age were affected by sex addiction and saw a parent or parents live in an uncontrollable state of recklessness, which was the result of forms of abandonment. Eventually, they weren't self-conscious about the consequences of actions and behavior, and so they didn't use caution during danger. Furthermore, they didn't teach safety to kids, which can make everything confusing and overwhelming for them. Modifying excessiveness is one area of a person's life that requires the most attention. Once you are out of line with yourself, you wouldn't want to modify compulsive talk about a doctrine, family, friends, kids, or spouse, all while disrespecting others' beliefs, opinions, or privacy, people of authority, and the Church al-Hakim Allah established. When God said man needed to repopulate the earth, also He wanted mankind to modify their irresistible and unconscious impulses to avoid corruption. Proven righteous facts often become distorted with unproven and unrighteous forms of manipulation. Players and sex addiction. Sex with multiple women surrounds players' feelings and emotions, so much so, that the player mentality is often the center focus, and everyone around is often induced to fear. Once the player lacks compassion, empathy, and enthusiasm, they become disconnected from the main relationship. After that, players tend to deny typically anything from the use of alcohol or drugs, financial status, other relations, STDs, support for their kids, even whereabouts. Even though it is a demanding and draining lifestyle, this type of behavior affects multiple areas of a player's life. However, some men suffering from abandonment issues may be trying to repair the relationship they didn't get with their mother. Players become unwilling to admit their faults when this shows signs of carelessness to induce others to irresponsible thoughts. But ordinarily, players don't acknowledge the carelessness until someone points it out, and then it becomes an overwhelming factor. Confronting players has been proven to be difficult. Most become confrontational when confronted. Both men and women ought to stop going out of the way, convincing others to cheat on their spouse to seek revenge. This only worsens circumstances, and sure, you never consider STD's provability until it is too late. When it results in life-threatening cancers and diseases, something most people rather not discuss. Not enough people are getting rid of STDs promptly, otherwise, more would be healthier today. Anymore, it isn't fair to say a woman is insecure when she has a sex addiction, without acknowledging a man does get insecure when he has a sex addiction. You must leave room for error. The STDs, multiple children, and denial of support can be overwhelming for men in these circumstances. It is hard for anyone to have a firm foundation with STDs. Literally, results are moving from place to place. Once a person gets rid of the STD, a house will stand. Some individuals go an eternity in hell on earth before acknowledging to get rid of the STDs. However, God will not allow a house to stand firm, the unbelief in him is too strong during these times. I can't count how many parents I have heard bragging saying, "I raised my children right, I'm a good mother or father," when they weren't able to keep good housing or provide long-term financial support. I have been there, endured the sufferings, and literally, it gets real. God said every tree of life brings good fruit, but a corrupt tree brings evil fruit. Though corruption is a comparison to trees, it shows how human ways of life can become corrupt. Otherwise, you don't force the sword on kids during their time of calamity. Why do fears hold us back? It is the excessive negative circumstances that you overlook to achieve a positive outcome. These fears hold you back when you are not in a habit of controlling sexual desires. When you don't control your sexual desire, things in this world come and go rather quickly. And most of us spend a lot of time thinking about why things don't last in our lives. However, most people don't take ownership of excessive tendencies until they have given up everything they have. When you are venomous for a rebellious nature, it consumes your whole character. Your beliefs and thoughts tend to control the ability to break the cycles of habitual habits, and the pride of someone judging your weaknesses stands in the way. In these situations, you fear religious saying, "You are too weak to remain wicked because you are already consumed with too much unrighteousness." Once these habits become aggressive, they become uncontrollable. When these habits become aggressive, reversing thoughts will require reversing the beliefs. If you are someone with a sex addiction, seek help. When a person is out of line with self, they have become defiled of flesh, crooked, lacking substances. Defilement can include discoloration of the eye, skin, and toenail bed, embedded tumors, even marks on the skin. Also, poor hygiene and sanitation can lead to STDs. Obesity too is formed by an obsession with foods, however, all of which are signs of corruption. Obsessing over nudity also promotes a love for money in the form of addictions, gambling, drugs, and drinking, more signs of corruption. And eventually healing through purification will be needed. Based on 2008 data, statistics showed thereafter in the US 2014, there were 20 million new infections each year. New cases of STDs cost $16 billion in direct medical costs each year. 50% of new infections occurred in young people ages 15 to 24, a quarter of whom had sex. The number of existing infections was estimated at 110 million, and the estimated number of Americans living with an STD was 65 million. More women carried common STDs than men, and women infected were pregnant passed it on to newborns. Women and young people are severely affected by STDs, though bisexual and gay men are at the greatest risk among the same age group. Increasing rates of STDs among men contributed to the overall increase in 2014 across all diseases. Risk factors range from lifetime sex partners to cultural, environmental, and social behavior. And the overall quality of health increased other health conditions in all age groups. Sexual addiction and overcoming. Anyone can have a sex addiction, no matter their gender, sexual preferences, or other factors. Ordinarily, the excessive actions and behavior with sex forms greed. Self-goals. 1. Decide to quit and don't make excuses. 2. Set a date to quit, and then completely stop. Don't waste time. Acknowledge you can't control emotions and fears of not having sex with random partners. 3. Write out a mission statement with a will to overcome the addiction. 4. Control any behavior that puts you back in the same addictive mindset, and anything else puts you at risk of backsliding into your former habits. 5. Seek out support, and spend time with the people you love most. 6. Celebrate your accomplishments and think about how far you have come. If you go a month or two without exhibiting addictive behavior, treat yourself to something to honor your achievements. Reversing thoughts and actions. To switch directions of actions and thoughts is to achieve righteous victory. But people who give meaningless sexual advancements to others spend a lot of time applying themselves to excessive stuff that won't get them ahead in life. Ordinary people who acknowledge someone who only applies themselves towards meaningless actions and thoughts usually attack the person's beliefs or character. If the person is employed, even a boss will give them harder tasks than the others. Meaningless conversation and opinions will get you nowhere, and if you are giving any meaningless advice, just stop. You will only hinder others' success. When forming meaningless thoughts of applying yourself towards sexual advancements that hinder others' eternal relationships, you must reverse the actions and thoughts. And avoid meaningless chatter. Avoid getting a selfish point across. Typically, most altercations start with one or more individuals wanting to get a point across. People who have compulsive or obsessive disorders often value getting a selfish point across rather than the relationship itself. When people are illiterate and value getting a point across, it can come off as evasive and ignorant. This happens when they don't have the facts in order. When people are intelligent and value getting a point across, they can come off as arrogant and judging. This happens when they think of themselves too much. But the people who value getting a point across tend to deny these facts. And obvious reasons why some people in traffic consciously cut off others or end up in verbal altercations. To avoid selfish points of view, try not to form selfish beliefs, opinions, or values. Also, modify your irresistible and unconscious impulses responsibly. Don't wait for God or people of authority to modify your actions and behavior for you. Natural over habitual impulses. To do something naturally means that by nature these things exist, and often the things we people do are naturally established, but doing things natural can lead to a habit. In the body of a church, excessiveness is voided out. Due to the preacher's continual thirst for delivering God's message, to those who acknowledge changing their unmodified actions and behavior. They realize modified impulses can lead to eternal life on earth, and unmodified impulses can lead to eternal death on earth. And this is whether tradition plays a factor. From my understanding, you cannot acknowledge obeying laws without obeying them yourself. It is just easier to point the finger at others' actions and behavior, if the finger doesn't reverse pointing at you. How can you embody a compassionate, kind, and loving spirit? By showing compassion for people in a time of need, showing kindness gently and humbly, and showing love with affection in a passionate way. Reversing player roles. According to Genesis, when Eve ate the forbidden fruit and then convinced Adam to do the same, seducing temptation began its course then, so don't blame God. Either women try to replace the relationship they didn't obtain with their father or desire to treat men as objects. Players, put your macho but big boy boxers on to make wiser choices and stop creating confusion to seek a side chick when your woman doesn't oblige to your list of demands. Be more concerned with her health condition, rather than limiting access to better mental and physical capabilities. Self-goals. 1. Stop looking for someone to blame for womankind seduction. And simply, rise above the adulterous boyfriend or husband role who doesn't face fears. To change the overall perspective of unfavorable and untraditional ways of dealing with a woman's seduction. 2. Players need to acknowledge what a spiritual man's character is to appear like, to be of relevance as a husband in a marriage. The appearance is that of a godly male, purified mentally and physically. 3. Avoid stepping outside the marriage to profit negatively, due to excessive spending habits. An affair of matters dear to the heart is to budget wisely daily. 4. Exercise patience daily in verbal conversations with anyone. Men need to open up to communicate effectively with the spouse whether working or non-working in the relationship. Speak and then allow them to speak, talk corrective English and then leave the room to exit the conversation before interrupting them to speak. These love wars have been going on for ages now, it is time for a change. Rather than create love wars, express love through Allah and the church. 5. Looking for a booty call ought to be a thing of the past and hustling off women too. This includes escort services, prostitution, strip clubs, topless bars, women, even those poses for nude scenes, etc. Don't be a man who 1. Values being accompanied by a strange woman part-time. 2. Values a relationship from part-time love. 3. Is open to comparing part-time love to a real marriage. 4. Accept any type of polyamorous relationship, only accept a monogamous one. 5. Is willing to pay bills and allow their woman to bring in another man for sex. Otherwise, don't let the fear of being alone for several years dominate your effortless behavior. 6. Values a need for a woman whose only concern is sex with anyone and everyone. 7. Ruthlessly and vainly have sex for the pleasure of dominating women. 8. Doesn't value verifying the new woman's criminal, educational, marital, spiritual, work history or furthermore her last name. Try to find a woman who has or is willing to advance her achievements, education, goals, and income. Bottom line, according to the Bible, it is only necessary to form one relationship as eternal, so avoid cheating women out of this richness of the human spirit. The privilege of superiority over a woman eternally requires a sense of leadership and guidance, and so a man ought to embrace confidence to remain in the relationship. And so, stand for what you believe is righteous and true and give your all to the relationship. Don't overlook positive things in a relationship that is to last, to make irresponsible decisions based upon the quote, brothers before whores. In general, if you don't value the quote, you won't need to honor it. Use the available time to help build up kids, teens, and other adults into honorable lifestyles that will achieve lasting results. Be a man who values living a heavenly and righteous lifestyle. A man who is concerned about the affair of matters dear to the heart while providing for the home. If your spouse does dance at a strip club, simply don't entertain the adulterous lifestyle. If a side dude surfaces into the marriage, deal with the affair of matters with an open heart and don't hold grudges. Avoid destruction, verbal wars, and violence of any kind. Although some women date men who are married, men ought to value following formal traditional ways of marriage while respecting other men's privacy. And avoid meeting a woman who values using the quote, sisters before pimps. They won't acknowledge being a responsible spouse effectively. Remember, it is possible to find a spouse who embodies a gentle diva mentality. Anything more than this will involve playing into polygamous roles of marriage, which are not recommended, and neither is digital dating after marriage. Cowardliness for long-term commitments. The Bible is the original reference to how man and woman are to share a partnership. Having a cold heart toward love and respect can hinder doing significant things in the relationship and make you a coward to long-term commitments. You run from things that you are to value most. Often this is the result of abandonment issues along with the love that you didn't get from supportive parents. Once you are in a habit of denying love and respect, relationships suffer, when neither takes the initiative to acknowledge things getting done by one another. Some people guard their differences until the other person leads in a relationship, but for some, this never happens, and they become broken-hearted. After that, they fear the traditional sense of relationships and become susceptible to the untraditional sense of relationships. A person then becomes willing to break the marriage tradition after being hurt by the continual occurrences. This shows a need to love God first, to establish a goal of how far to go with love, and to know when it is possible to let your guard down. It isn't necessary after that to express negative emotions, once your heart trusts God. So, avoid abandoning fruitful relationships, and stepping out of marriage tradition. If there are kids in the relationship, their needs will become unmet while wallowing in selfless pride too long, before realizing you have failed in relationships that meant the most. Also, avoid friends benefits-based relationships that don't give God the formality of having experienced it. You ought to know to whom you want to give love, respect, and compassion. Things a married man shouldn't do. 1. Rim job, eating the anus or booty, booty snatching. 2. Lusting for strippers, going to nightclubs for women who dance on poles. 3. Pimping, pimping a prostitute for money. 4. Using a child for sex to keep the girlfriend or spouse. Fatal things a married man shouldn't do. 1. Cursing kids or spouse. 2. Seeking revenge against the spouse for cheating outside the marriage. 3. Taking kids to drinking hot spots. 4. Driving drunk. 5. Dating other women or becoming a one-night stand. 6. Seeking multiple relations. 7. Cover up with gluttony, excessive drinking, or eating, also the spouse shouldn't either. 8. Cooking unhealthy foods for the family, foods with fewer nutrients. 9. Looking for a spouse while she's cheating. 10. Creating conflict because the spouse cheats outside the marriage. 11. Holding bitterness because you know she cheats. 12. Nitpicking fights with a side dude that the spouse has cheated with. Obvious things a married man shouldn't do. 1. Allowing someone to insert a fist into their anus. 2. Grabbing someone else's booty, other than the spouse. 3. Going boxer or underwearless outside the home. These are things that use up a man's best energy when the time can be consumed giving quality care to the kids. All those things have been proven to be useless in a marriage. Once God acknowledged in the beginning woman will continually fail based upon seducing temptation, it is up to men to remain fruitful. Only once the spouse is willing to give a divorce should a man take steps outside the marriage. This is for the wellness of the kids and to avoid fatality or infidelity. These are things men can do to obtain better bonds of communication during the marriage. And so, avoid waiting to change the evil ways, because all the above forms disrespect towards the Father in heaven. Deep down inside, no married woman wants her spouse to become untrustworthy towards the Father's image, even though it is the playgirls who are leading men into seeking naughty girl roles, etc. Setbacks with actors, athletes, pro wrestlers, NBA players, NFL players, singers, stylists, hip-hop artists, rappers, and retail owners. Typically, most men in these leagues get a lot of nutrition because the body craves it. They tend to give up during their middle ages and become unwilling to consume higher amounts of natural foods, but this is when the body needs it most. During the Middle Ages, the body become less likely to heal from cancer and diseases as did prior years, therefore more is needed. With the FDA warning supplement manufacturers to cut back on dosages of vitamin supplements, doctors must stop encouraging patients to take higher dosages. This is for fear of lawsuits. The body needs extra nutrients like a car needs gas, but many are willing to put more gas in a car instead. Ultimately, this has most professional athletes retiring early, and generally, African Americans' life expectancy is lesser than other ethnic backgrounds. For all players within these communities, life can become demanding and draining when adding in injuries and multiple relations. Although the men in these leagues share their entire life stories with fans, it would be a blessing to see more African Americans achieve longer with grace and fulfill more destinies. Example of multivitamin dosages. I'm a woman 48 years of age and 5 feet 10 inches in height. About 30% of my vision is lost with having had full amounts of cancers and diseases. When I took one multivitamin, cancer and diseases started clearing out slowly, but after I took 2 multivitamins a day, cancer and diseases cleared out moderately. If I had not taken them twice a day, I would have lost my entire teeth and vision before reaching age 50. This was how defiled my cancer and diseases were. Now I have healthier teeth and gums, and my vision hasn't been lost any more than it had been. However, I wouldn't recommend taking more than 2 for an adult on any given basis. So many people with cancers and diseases nowadays are willing to lose everything. To what cost do we people say no to doctors? Enough is enough. I don't want surgery nor reoccurring hospital visits if it means losing any of my body parts. If this is the case, take a herbal infection supplement before taking other multivitamin supplements. Note, a little secret to losing weight for adults without health problems: take one multivitamin in the morning at 8:30, and another one at noon. This will give you a ton of energy to burn the fat off before bedtime, but try not to eat after 5 p.m. daily. Basically, to not add more calories once the fat has been burnt off. If you have days when you can't control eating after 5 p.m., drink plenty of water during the night to decrease excess fat added, and enjoy life to the fullest.